Why is this happening to the Palestinians? Why is this happening to our brothers and sisters elsewhere in the world? Why is there such horrible oppression happening to Muslims all around the globe? This is not an easy question. It requires us to look beyond the veil of what's happening. It requires us to probe into potential hikmah, or underlying reasons and divine wisdom behind the happenings in the world. And inshallah, I'll try to give you 10 potential reasons of why this is happening, and do try to follow and focus, because these points are connected to one another, and I'll try to give it in a sequential way. Number one is an answer actually by Sheikh Bilal Assad. So I have to quote him, and it's not going to be a perfect quote of what he said, but basically he said that what's happening to the Palestinians, for example, the similitude is that of the people from before who were also oppressed, who also faced great tyranny and violence and oppression and massacre. And he gave the example of the people who were oppressed by Fir'aun, or Pharaoh. And he gave a specific example of the wife of Pharaoh, which is Asiyah radiallahu anha, where she lived a life that was full of challenges, trials and tribulations. She was oppressed, tortured, till she died. But at the very end, she achieved great success. It was said that she made the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to build her home near God in paradise. So that is an honor unlike anything. We couldn't fathom what that is. But the nearness to God, that is such a great honor. So she achieved great success, although her life was anything but peaceful, right? So this is an example of the people throughout human history that will be chosen for such crazy, intense trials and tribulations. And that is what's happening to our brothers and sisters around the world. For example, what's happening in Palestine. Now, of course, people can ask and probe further, and they should. And the question would usually be why? Why should there be people that will continue to face oppression? That brings us to point number 2, which is this is a repetition of history and a warning to the leaders. Because what's happening right now is a repainting of the same picture, because the same thing is happening all over again. And this is a warning. The first warning is to the leaders, because it shows what happens when the leaders who've been given great gifts, great power of influence, money and wealth and so on, and they're supposed to be the caretakers of the people. But so many leaders from the past and now, they've gone astray. Instead of using those gifts, the responsibilities that have been bestowed upon them, they use those gifts, their position and power, to reinforce their position for their own desires. And this is what Pharaoh did. He had monumental power and wealth and influence and so on. But what did he do with it? He oppressed his people. He abused it for his own desires. And this is what we can see right now with the ruling elites, the Zionists and their allies, the Satanists, the people in the highest echelons of the world powers. They wield gargantuan wealth and power and influence, which has been bestowed upon them as a test to see what do they do with it. They could have used that for the betterment of the people, for mankind, for the world, which is playing the real role, the correct role of a Khalifa, of a vicegerent, of the deputy of God, a representative of God on earth, to make it a better place. That's not what they did with the free will that's been given to them, with the gifts that's been given to them. And therefore we see a repeat in history. And that was for the leaders. Which brings us to point number 3, which is a warning and a lesson for the people. Because it shows this is what happens when the people allow tyrants to rule against God's commands. This is what happens when most people turn a blind eye to evil and corruption happening around them. This is what happens when people sit on the fence and do nothing, because all it takes for evil to triumph is for good guys to do nothing. Because by default, evil is continuously working. Satan doesn't rest. He's a hard worker. So by default, if the forces of good does nothing, evil will triumph. Now with point number 2 and point number 3, it is inevitable that someone's going to be a victim of this situation. So the higher the intensity of what's happening at point number 2 and 3, then what's going to happen is that the kind of oppression that's going to take place is also going to be very severe. And those who will undergo such severe tests are only people with high caliber in terms of their spiritual potential, in terms of their iman and so on. And this sets up trials and tribulations and rewards for those with high spiritual potential and iman, for the selected ones. Because we are only tested according to our level of faith, our level of spiritual potential. And we can see the people who are oppressed, especially in Palestine, for example, we've seen evidence that these are people of great level of iman, and they have great virtues, their sabr, their patience, their perseverance. They have all the great virtues. And these people, their iman is top tier. So throughout human history, if history is going to repeat itself, these are the kinds of people who can undergo such trials. Now, because these people, they tend to have the characteristics that Allah loves. They have really good virtues, great, excellent virtues, their sabr, their patience, their level of iman, and their steadfastness, and so on. What happens when Allah loves a person or a people? What happens when Allah wills good for a person or a people? Allah will test them more. Allah will give them more trials and tribulations. And this is just how Allah does things. So this is the predicament of true believers who are being oppressed and being victimized. And they go through what others before them had also gone through. And of course, Allah's chosen people, the people that He has chosen for Himself to be in paradise, they will be guided aright. And if Allah wants to guide a person or people, Allah can guide them in many ways. And in the example of the oppressed people, for example, the Palestinians, they are put in a place and in a situation where it's really hard to stray away from the path. Allah has removed the worldly deceptions, the ghurur, from them, a significant amount, if not all. Allah has also made evil evident in front of their eyes, the enemies clear, so that they stay focused. And this is a great contrast to other countries and other places where there's relative peace, but there's a lot more chance for people to fall into temptations, for people to sin, for people to indulge in worldly affairs and desires. And that's a good food for thought, because it is a clear distinction of physical outward appearances. One looks like heaven on earth, yet it could be an example of the wrath of God, while the other one looks like hell on earth, but it is exemplifying God's mercy and forgiveness. On a related note, we should mention that there are great souls out there in those parts of the world where there's relative ease, but a greater chance of falling into temptations, greater level of worldly deception, and where evil is not so evident. Yet there are souls out there that remain steadfast despite all of that deception, and they fight the evil within and on the outside. So they are also on a great jihad. And those that have been gifted with God's guidance and His love to such a high degree, of course they're going to be meant for the highest levels of paradise. And nothing befalls a believer other than it expiates him of his sins, right? That is a well-known hadith. So our brothers and sisters that's going through such insane, intense trials, inshallah, by the time they leave this world, they will leave in a state of purity. And that is the best way to meet your Lord. And they are also put in a situation, in a predicament where martyrdom is made easy for them. And martyrs are one of the VIPs of the hereafter. They are given special privileges for themselves and on behalf of their families. They can intercede on behalf of their families. So what's happening right now is that thousands upon thousands of people are being destined into the highest levels of paradise, inshallah. And they have earned this through their steadfastness on their faith in the face of great evil and adversity, to their sabr and perseverance of hell on earth. And it is said that those who have tasted paradise, they will forget that any of this ever happened. It is almost like they have an amnesia of their trials on earth. And while those that have tasted paradise would never want to come back on earth to relive the human experience, the martyrs actually want to come back to taste the sweetness of their martyrdom and the honor that has been given to them because of their status. So these people have been given such high levels of honor. We see destruction, but Allah gives them honor. And all of that leads us to point number 5. With all that's been happening, the portrayal of such great people, what's happening is the spreading of guidance and the igniting of iman throughout the whole world. As these people are being oppressed in the midst of great destruction and evil, we see glimpse of what real iman is. We see glimpse of what true perseverance is, what sabr is, what it means to stand steadfast against evil. And this has reinvigorated iman throughout the world, and has brought people into Islam in droves. And this is one of the divine planning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the oppressors enact their evil schemes to try and wipe away Islam and all that is good, Allah also schemes, Allah also plans and make Islam the fastest growing religion in the whole world. And as the iman of the ones who are oppressed continue to grow, the iman of others around the world are being invigorated and being ignited. So there is a renewal of iman across the world. And this is part of God's divine planning. On the outside, we see physical destruction, physical losses. But on the inside, we see spiritual gains and spiritual success. And this is part of the great planning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and part of His divine mercy, which prevails over His wrath. This brings us to number 6. With the growing size of the ummah, not only our numbers are growing, but we have unifying factors that helps glue the ummah together. We have a force that keeps us united in a time where there is great division amongst the believers. And this is timely because right now the forces of evil is also huddling together. They're getting their act together. They want to beat this right now. So this is a time where we have to unite, but we have to unite in truth. This brings us to point number 7, where Allah makes Islam grows bigger. Allah also makes evil more evident. We can see many countries are becoming more aware through the UN resolutions. Of course, we can talk about how effective that is on a separate topic, but more and more people, even non-Muslims, are supporting the Palestinian cause, for example. And because of this, more countries, more people are looking into who's actually behind the scenes, who's pulling the strings, and people are becoming more aware of the great evil that is in front of their eyes. So all of that culminates into point number 8, where so many people are being put in their natural state of servanthood. When people prostrate their heads, when people put their hands up in supplication to Allah, making dua to Allah with tears flowing down their eyes, that is the natural state of a servant with their Lord. And that is the bigger objective. A lot of people are overly concerned on the outcome. When is God going to answer my prayers? When is He going to give relief? When is He going to give complete resolution to the issues and so on? Those are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We trust that Allah hears each and everything that we ask for. We trust that Allah is most just. We trust that Allah is most merciful. We trust that Allah is perfect in His divine planning. He is perfect in His infinite wisdom. So we do not worry about this and we leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whatever that's happening in your life that makes you in your natural state of a servant to God, then that thing is good for you. Even though it might look bad, it might look like a catastrophe, it might look like a disaster, it might look like trials and tribulations. If it makes you closer to God, then it is a good thing. This brings us to point number 9, where one of the potential reasons for the withholding of the complete resolution of these issues and what would appear to be the withholding from accepting our du'as immediately is that these events could play a crucial role in the history of mankind towards the unfolding of the end of days. These things may not happen until the prophesied signs have fully materialized. Therefore, these things will happen according to the divine planning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not according to our whims and wishes. It will only occur according to Allah's divine planning. And with that, Allah is showing who is really in charge. You may believe there are cabals doing all this thing at the back. They have the power in the world. You may believe that you have the power. Allah is showing who's really in charge. He is showing who has real sovereignty over all things. If He wants to withhold, even though the whole world is making dua, if He is going to withhold that from happening, who can make it happen? Similarly, if He wants to give victory, even though everybody is going against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one can avert victory from happening. Finally, we get to point number 10, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing all of us perspective and giving us hope. We have better perspective of the upper limits of trials and tribulations in this world, so that people don't feel like they're going through hardship that's the end of the world, like it's the worst thing that could happen for them, and that they know that other people are also going through similar or worse hardship, and we have a better yardstick to compare. Although the comparing trials between people is a tricky topic, and we have to cover that in a separate video, but nevertheless it gives hope to people. It gives hope to people that they can and should endure and persevere in whatever trials and tribulations that they are going through. And this is a grim reminder that the world is a temporary test, and that our test can end at any moment.